Cayman Islands Porsche Sprint Challenge Great Britain. It's a new championship for 2020. Like everything, it's had a delayed start. It kicked off at Snetterton in mid-July in the sunshine. And here at Donington, the first of two 25-minute races is set to get underway. All of these, the 982 type, 718 iteration of the Cayman. It's the GT4 Club Sport, 3.8-litre weapons, 6-cylinder, 6-speed gearboxes. They weigh in at about 1,400 kilos. And it's a brilliant concept, this. It's a new championship, as I say, but it brings together lots of the young guns, aspiring GT racers, and also a good number of the AMs, many of whom, like Pete Chambers, Nigel Rice, for example, have been racing Porsches for many, many seasons. They're going to get 2 green flag laps because they qualified yesterday in the dry. It is a rather wet morning, sadly. They're on wet tyres, of course, on the Michelin rubber, and they'll slot into place shortly for the standing start, ready to get racing underway. David Addison and Andy McEwen, trackside. It's looking very GT, very Le Mans, this, Andy, as they pierce the gloom with the headlights, but we're in for a lively race in these conditions.
I think so. It's a very exciting championship, this, isn't it? It's great to have a good grid of cars out there. They look the business as well, don't they? Look, watching them lining up on the grid a moment or two ago, each and every one of them beautifully presented. And yes, the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit is a circuit that always produces good racing, be it rain or dry. So I think we are in for an entertaining pair of races, and 2 races in one, because you mentioned that this championship caters not only for experienced drivers, but also for those with less experience. We have a Pro Class and an AM Class, both of them pretty well supported. And although at Snetterton they both had the same driver winning in both classes, it was James Dorlan who did the double in the Pro Class. It was Ambrogio Perfetti who won both races from pole position in the AM Class. That was in very dry, hot, sunny conditions, a completely different circuit as well to this one. So I think today we could be in for a little bit of a mixed-up order. Yeah,
James Dorlan, as you say, was the dominant man at Snetterton, but he's only 4th on the grid, so he's the championship leader with a brace of wins. Ambrogio Perfetti, the AM championship leader. Seems odd in the sense thinking about championships, but it's a relatively compact calendar, this. But so we're only on round 3. Ambrogio Perfetti, experienced driver, largely of historics. He got a 6th and a 4th overall. He's raced in, for example, what you might call historic Porsche Super Cup, the Patrick Peter 2-litre Porsche 911 series that he introduced a couple of years ago. So Ambrogio Perfetti, who comes from a good racing family, remember, his brother is a British GT champion. Father races as well, so the confectionery magnate family. And his car run by Into Racing. Another point to make about this is you've got many of the top Porsche racing teams. Into, you'll be familiar with from Carrera Cup GB, Redline Racing, Simon Leonard's team here, en masse as ever. Jordan Racing Team running a car for inveterate customer Pete Chambers, who whisper it, is the oldest man on the grid now, 72 years of age. Pete began in hot rod racing in the 1970s with his Escort Mark 1 around Arlington, and was in the 90s and early noughties a mainstay of what was then really the Porsche Club of Great Britain's championship, and then the early days of Carrera Cup GB. But after a few years racing, and indeed rolling a Lotus Cortina, he's been tempted back into Porsche racing with the Jordans. It seemed very odd yesterday watching his lone mechanic hanging out the pit board, which was one Andrew Jordan. So from winning in minis a week ago, the British Touring Car champion found a job with a pit board yesterday. However, as I say, it is full of good drivers, full of good teams, but great cars, and considering how tough it is to launch a championship anyway, never mind global pandemics, I think Porsche GB has done an excellent job here.
Yeah, I think so. It's a healthy grid, isn't it? And the racing at Snetterton, from what I've heard, was pretty entertaining as well. So, yeah, full credit to them.
A word about Alex Toff Jones, just went through the shot there at the back. Now, he had an accident in qualifying, so for the man that's 6th in the championship, he had a 7th and a retirement at Snetterton. He will be one to watch coming through. You can't miss that car because it is in the 1970 Le Mans Porsche 917 winning livery that Richard Atwood and Hans Hermann carried, the Porsche Salzburg colours, right down to the number, of course, of 23. But it looked, there it is, decidedly dog-eared yesterday. He went off the road early doors in qualifying, got it back to the pit lane, where it deposited lots of liquid all over the pit lane floor and was pushed away, but the team has made it immaculate for today. It's another of the Nick Dudfield Into Racing cars. Pete Chambers there, going through shot, and the Veluga car number 22, Ben Hetherington's team, Carl Cavers, who works in the video game industry, so he's responsible for things like Forza and Dirt 2 and Toka Race Driver 2, and now having a go in the real world rather than the virtual world. 1 by 1 staggered grid. Standing start, therefore. It is a 25-minute race, not a set number of laps. And is everybody there? No, there is a gap, I fear, on that grid where Ian Humphries looks to be missing. No, he's just in the wrong place, so he's now being encouraged forward. He was a row further back, so one or two of the drivers, relative rookies, And coming from track days, he did a bit of brick car last year, Ian Humphries. His is the 4th car up against the grass on the right-hand side, the red, white and blue Beluga colours. Right, so after glorious sunshine yesterday, it's a damp start to the day. They're all on Michelin wet. We're good to go as the headlights pierce the gloom, and the lights in a moment will go out now to get round 3 of the Porsche Sprint Challenge GB underway, with a good start being made by the pole man then, Tom Jackson, GT4 racer last year, but on his outside line, look, is Ginetta stalwart Theo Edgerton, the teenager, trying to go around the outside. He fails so to do, and that's going to bring Archie Hamilton back up on the inside line. Perfetti in the Chupa Chups car on the outside line. The leading Am is about to get mugged as well as they drop downhill for the first time, but it is Tom Jackson that leads the way. Now, of course, he's got the best of the visibility. Everybody else is in the spray, but the flip side of the coin, Andy, is that he's the pioneer to find out where the grip is.
Yeah, this is a real voyage into the unknown, isn't it? It was dry all day yesterday, as you mentioned, and the Donington Park circuit is notorious for being especially greasy when it gets a bit damp out there. So, yeah, this could be a challenge. Opportunistic start there as well for Hamilton, as you said, with second place.
And Toff Jones is on the mission, isn't he? So he was a GT4 racer last year, Alex Toff Jones, number 23. He was an Aston Martin driver. He came from Ginetta Racing, as almost every racing Yorkshireman seems to have done over the last decade, and he's on the back now of 33 Chris Carr, who raced the Cayman 718 within GT4 of the British GT Championship last year. Alex Toff Jones gets up the inside line going into Coppis, picks off the place, so he is absolutely a man on a mission, Alex Toff Jones. As down towards the Fogarty S's for the first time comes Tom Jackson, then experienced driver of Carrera Cup GB and of single-seaters. He's driver coaching John Westbrook, who you'll find in 12th place in this race, but Jackson at the moment is edging away slightly from Theo Edgerton in second place.
Yeah, Hamilton, isn't it, in second place?
Sorry,
we got past Edgerton, but now Edgerton looks quicker, so it was an opportunistic start for Hamilton, but the man that started second on the grid, Theo Edgerton, is looking to try and get back into P2. They head up towards the final hairpin at Goddard's then for the first time. Clean first lap, which is good news. We weren't guaranteed of that really in these conditions, but you're right, Alex Toff Jones is the man we need to watch here. It's crucial for him, isn't it, that he gets past these AM cars as quickly as possible before the rest of the pro class escape, because you score points within your class.
That's right, he's just picked off another of the AMs, Pete Chambers, so as they come over the timing line, what you've now got is the race order, and it is Jackson, Hamilton, Edgerton, Dorlin, and then Ethan Hawkey, whose sister Esme Hawkey is the dominant Pro-Am driver in Carrera Cup GB this year. So James Dorlin, championship leader, still stuck down in 4th place. Number 32, is he on the move yet? There he is. You can see Hawkey behind him as they drop down towards the L hairpin. So James Dorlin in that ultra-smart car that is run by In2 Racing, rather than being on the attack, he's being attacked by Ethan Hawkey, crawling all over him. The red line racing car look of Ethan Hawkey looking to try to make a move as they go up through Schwann's curve now. This is not helping Dorlin in terms of making progress nor scoring points.
Yeah, Dorlin had a big wobble as he tried to ask for the power out of the old hairpin, and the rear tyres just weren't giving him the grip that he needed, and that is why Esme Hawkey is making an even more concerted effort now to find a way through. There is the number 27 machine further back. That's Ian Humphries, who is second in the AM class. Leading the AM class at the moment is Nigel Rice, who had a pair of third places in class at Snetterton last time out, but is still looking for his first class win.
I have a vague recollection, it was here probably about 2 decades ago. Nigel had quite a large accident down at the old hairpin, but he has been an inveterate Porsche racer for many, many years, haulage contractor, and as you say, the leading Am at the moment. Battle is on for second place still. Archie Hamilton, who's had quite a few years out of the cockpit, building up a very successful YouTube channel. That's something for young people, you understand. He's keeping the even younger Theo Edgerton at bay for the moment. James Dorlin is 4th, but not making the progress forward. Tom Jackson led at the end of the opening lap by 11 tenths of a second, and there is a 10-second penalty being applied to car number 33, which is Chris Carr. There, going very, very deep through the Goddard's left-hander. You see number 27, which is the car of Ian Humphries, and that's going to put him under attack from Ambrogio Perfetti as they come across the line. So Perfetti goes through, takes the place away as they drop down towards the corner. Or does he? No, he does not. He runs up the inside. And is Humphries another one that's got a penalty? No, he's lost a lap on the timing screen. Now that puzzles me, as though he's got a transponder problem, because I wasn't thinking that Ian Humphries had lost a lap. Now he's been put back into the right place. Yes, so Ian Humphries was 7th. He's now down to 8th, because while we've been unravelling his transponder issues, Perfetti has got past him. James Dorlin, though, is really struggling, either in these conditions or because he's having to defend from Ethan Hawkey, or both, because he just cannot get away.
Yeah, Ethan looks a lot quicker, and Dorlin, to be fair, has not had the pace this weekend, even in the dry, has he? So maybe it's a circuit-specific thing, but Ethan Hawkey is quite a bit quicker right now, forces Dorlin to drive defensively into Coppis, and that's a tricky corner to go in on the tight line on, because you tend to understeer wide wide through the exit of the corner. He's on the curb as well. Now is James Dorling, and Ethan Hawkey is alongside, heading down towards the chicane, but he's on the outside line, and you don't want to be going around the outside into the chicane. All sideways for Hawkey, runs on, gone on the wetter side of the road. I think there he clobbers the curbs for good measure, and for the time being, at least, James Dorling can breathe a sigh of relief.
He can, but Ethan Hawkey has seemingly got better pace. He should be able to bring that gap down again. Theo Edgerton, in the meantime, perhaps bearing in mind that he didn't finish the second race at Snetterton, not taking chances here. Nigel Rice then leading the way still in the AMs, as you see Alex Toff Jones going through on the inside of Mike Price. He's one of the first people to race one of these 718 Caymans, and comes up through the approach to Goddard's now. Leaders go by. It still looks like it's midnight, doesn't it, in the gloom? But Tom Jackson, as we are at, what, 9:15 at Donington, leads the way. The gap is going up between the top two. It's over 2 seconds. It's 4/10, second to third. Archie Hamilton, dare one suggest now, he's having to think a little bit more about defending.
Yeah, absolutely. He's well and truly dropped back from Tom Jackson, and Theo Edgerton is again applying the pressure, but he has been since the start of the race, and so far Archie hasn't cracked. Down through the old hairpin, they both look reasonably stable. In fact, slightly wider line there for Edgerton, and gets dangerously close to those painted curbs. You do not want to be running onto those curbs in these conditions. They're like ice. A very popular place to have an accident is the old hairpin in the wet, precisely for that reason. It's very easy to run wide, and once you get on those curbs, you have no grip.
Absolutely right. This is the downside of being so close to East Midlands Airport, which is getting busier, noticeably busier yesterday compared to a month ago. So there you've got 54. That's Theo Edgerton then in the TCR car, TCR Lee Brooks team that for many, many years has been in Ginetta Racing, or Clio's. Lee Brooks himself was a independent in the British Touring Car Championship. His father, very successful hot rod racer in the Midlands, and then turning their attention really for the first time to running Porsches. Theo Edgerton, 16 years of age, he's the youngest man on the grid, comes out of Ginetta Junior Racing, ex-Carter. He's lost a place from where he qualified to where he's running in the race, but he's not given up in his quest to get that back, has he, from Archie Hamilton now, look, as they drop down towards the Melbourne hairpin. 18 minutes are still on the clock. And
Ethan Hawkey, having dropped away from James Dorling with that moment a lap ago, has not been able to reel him back in either. So maybe Dorling, now that he's free from the pressure of Ethan, might be able to chase down these two, especially should Hamilton and Edgerton start to battle each other hard. You can see there the gap is actually going up, I think.
Many of them running wide, you see, going through Goddard's, which is often where there is a bit more grip, because on the wetter part of the road, you'll find the grip is on the outside line where there is more rubber normally spat towards, so you use that to get a bit more grip. So if the lines look strange, it's not necessarily that people are making mistakes, it's that they're hunting for more grip on that outside line. Alex Toff Jones, meanwhile, still a man on a mission. The fastest lap has been done by the race leader Tom Jackson, because pretty much everybody else is in traffic, but he is absolutely storming away, and a very impressive drive this is turning out to be.
Yes, imperious really. 2.6 seconds the margin. He did set the fastest first sector of anyone until Theo Edgerton in third place pipped him just by a few hundred. So I think Edgerton's got the pace if only he could get past Archie Hamilton. Of course, he out-qualified Hamilton, so he'll be a little frustrated, no doubt, that he can't get through. Frustration, I'm sure, is something that Alex Toff Jones is feeling right now too. He's still stuck behind that second place and battle, and again, not making progress. Now, that might well be because of the conditions. You mentioned that the grippier side of the road tends to be off the traditional racing line, but that rather limits overtaking opportunities.
Does a little bit, unless you can force a mistake out of the guy ahead. James Dorling, the championship leader in fourth place, is lapping quicker than Theo Edgerton there in third place. And off the road goes Hamilton. That opens the door nice and wide for Edgerton to try to sprint up the inside line, down towards the Melbourne hairpin. Has he got the grit? Has he got the bravery under braking? He's certainly got the line, but Archie Hamilton tries to defend as best he can. Edgerton goes up the inside, goes out wide. Hamilton tries to get the cut back. That will put him on the inside, out of the Melbourne hairpin. The outside heading up towards Goddard's. He has to slot back in behind, and that is exactly what James Dorling needs. Look, because the gap is half. Hamilton has a cheeky look up the inside line going into Goddard's. This is for second place overall. Edgerton will head for the curb. Close to running a little bit too wide there, and Andy's made the point about how slippery those wet curbs are, but he gets away with that, comes across the timing line. So qualified second, he's back up into second in the race. Down to third is Hamilton, but then behind them is James Dorling, and that last lap was nearly a second quicker than Edgerton, and was over a second quicker than Hamilton, who made that mistake going into Fogarty's. That's all it takes. As you were saying, Andy, there might only be one racing line, but if you can put the pressure on ahead of you, make a mistake, suddenly your quid's in.
And the chicane is, oh, he's off. Oh, I don't believe it. Edgerton's thrown it away down at the old hairpin. He worked so hard to get that second place and just carried too much speed into that very tricky corner. We spoke about it earlier on. And I think that was because he'd finally broken through. He thought, right, now's my chance. I'm 4 seconds behind the leader. I've got a quarter of an hour to catch him. I've got to push on, but that's for too much, too soon.
So there he is. He was way wrong coming into the corner, wasn't he? It wasn't that he ran out wide. He was wrong coming down the hill and just went straight on into the gravel. Wet gravel compact, so he's able to come out the other side. But here is a line I prepared earlier. There may only be one line, but if you can apply the pressure to the guy ahead of you, your quid's in. And therefore, Archie Hamilton did try to apply pressure back to Theo Edgerton, and it did pay off because Edgerton did crack. He went off the road and has lost a big chunk of time as a consequence. So one down and one up for Archie Hamilton, and that's going to help James Dorlin as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he's onto the podium now, isn't he? And he is closing again on Archie Hamilton, who I'm not convinced is the second quickest driver out there at the moment, but he's managed to stay out of trouble thus far. Can he hang on to that second place to the flag, I wonder? You can tell Edgerton was pushing, can't you? He set the fastest first sector of anyone immediately before he threw it down the road. Here's another replay.
Yeah. Well, that's why he set the first sector, because he didn't brake, did he? So he was so fast down the hill, he just couldn't slow the car down. So there's the evidence as to where he went, and very nearly had to pay to get back into the circuit. He was so far off the line there. Right, there is the race leader, almost unnoticed. Absolutely faultless drive this by Tom Jackson, much underrated driver, and he leads now by 4.8 seconds. Remember, everyone's got the same car, so it's down to the teams, down to the drivers to get the best out of this, and the battle is taking up attention for second and third places now, with Archie Hamilton being caught by James Dorlin, who lapped half a second quicker last time around. That seems to be a car, and we have seen this on occasion in Carrera Cup as well. Some cars seem to get better in the second half of the race. As the race wears on, cars wake up almost and get better and better. Fourth is Ethan Hawke, and down to fifth is Theo Edgerton. We've also, of course, as you see on the graphic, had a change for the lead of the AMs, because the dominant Ambrosio Perfetti, dominant from his 2 wins at Snetterton, is back ahead of Nigel Rice that led early on. There he is, number 15. He's down to third in class.
I suspect he's had a moment somewhere then, because that happened all in one go. He was ahead of them a lap ago, but now he's not. So yeah, he's fallen down to the bottom step of the podium for the time being, and Rice finished third in both races at Snetterton. So yeah, he's nothing if not consistent. And we're watching the 22 machine, and this is Carl Cavers, the Beluga driver, running down in 14th place. But wherever you are in the field, you've got someone to race with, because immediately in front of him is that number 66 machine, and that's Westbrook. Gets it side by side here for second place overall. James Dorlin at the inside of Archie Hamilton at the Melbourne hairpin, but that inside line just doesn't give you the traction on the exit of the corner that you need to complete the move. And so for now, again, Hamilton hangs on to second.
But the gap coming down and down and down. 12.5 minutes to go as they come now up towards the timing line once more. Tom Jackson is away and gone, but you see the way that James Dorlin is now very much on the money for second place. He's going to get this done, surely, looking down towards Redgate. No, not quite. Did have a look. Archie Hamilton was able to fend him off. They're assessing where the braking point is, looking for the grip. James Dorlin way out wide over the curb, hooks a wheel onto the dirt, controls the slide. It's great to watch, applying more and more pressure to Hamilton. Careful, James, don't throw it all away. He's another experienced racer, not necessarily in Porsche terms, but he's come from driving McLarens in GT4 racing last year, part of the McLaren driver development programme. He was the junior saloon car champion, Clio Cup racer as well. So he's an experienced peddler, is James Dorlin, and putting that to good use now, right on the tail of Archie Hamilton. Yeah,
made the transition from front-wheel drive one-mate Clio racing to GT4 very quickly. He's very sideways through McLaren's. I think he's keen on getting this second place away from Archie Hamilton, isn't he? But he is in danger here, as you said, of making a mistake and costing himself. And remember, James Dorlin is the early championship leader. He's 9 points clear of Tom Jackson, but Tom Jackson is leading the race. So there is an extra incentive here for Dorlin to take second place. But it's better sometimes to settle for third than throw it down the road trying to gain one more place.
So through they turn. There you've got number 32, James Dorlin, heading down now towards the Melbourne hairpin. He has a look to the inside line. Is he going to be able to go through? Let's see. Brakes hard. The gap is there, and now you should have the drive coming off the corner. They're going to lean on each other, but James Dorlin, if he doesn't get his nose in front, is going to be on the outside line up towards Goddard's. He lifts, he slots back in behind. He needs the switchback, but of course, that is a left-hander. The next corner is a right, so he's got to plan the move at Redgate now, and Archie Hamilton will know which line to cover off. So James Dorlin is the quicker of the two, evinced by the fact that he's hacked away at the gap. Goes to the outside, can he sell a dummy? Yes, dives up the inside, brakes late, goes through, but he's got to be careful not to run out wide, and he has done it. He gets the power down the car, squirms underneath him, but James Dorlin has done it. And look at this, in the second half of the race, the progress that he is making is fantastic. Now, let's see what he can do about bringing down a 6.9 second gap to the leader.
Well, yes, that will take some doing, but I'll be fascinated to see what lap times he's capable of now that he's in clean air. Again, he's all over the curves coming out of the old hairpin. Fascinating racing that, wasn't it? It's all about searching for the grip. It's why drivers with karting experience tend to do so well in the wet, because, you know, that's a big factor in kart racing, and if it's something you can transfer onto the big circuits, it can definitely benefit you. Now Dorlin's through, he's away. The gap is probably the best part of 3/4 of a second or so as they head through Coppice Corner. Sector times, let's have a look then. Dorlin in the first sector was 2/10 quicker than the race leader. In the second sector, which they're about to complete now, just as they head into the chicane, he is, another 10th quicker, so he's 3/10 quicker than Tom Jackson already on this lap. I sense that he might need a bit more than that if he's to catch and ultimately overtake Jackson, but I think he's going to give this a good go.
He's going to give it a good go. I'm not convinced he will get there, given that we've got 9 minutes on the clock, but you never know. All it takes is for somebody to drop into the gravel and the safety car, and they all bunch up, and all bets are off, aren't they? So, as they come now up through the approach to Goddard's, race leader Tom Jackson goes through. Second still is James Dorlin, Archie Hamilton third. Ethan Hawkey has been a bit perplexing in all of this, because as we saw a few laps back, he dropped away and has never looked like responding. Dorlin goes way wide and loses the place to Hamilton as they come across the line, and that's probably the easiest pass Archie Hamilton has ever had. It almost makes one wonder whether there's a problem for Dorlin all of a sudden, because there was just no fight in that, and he didn't seem to be way out all over the grass, did he? But he lost massive amounts of time there.
Well, I noticed going down the exhibition straight and again between the hairpins that James was running a long way off the racing line, almost as if he was looking for the wetter part of the road. Now, to my untrained eye, the whole road looks quite damp at the moment, but it may be that his tyres are starting to overheat. You made the point that he's coming on strong as the race goes on, but has he now maybe taken too much out of those Michelin wets?
Oh, yeah, that's the answer. He was wide, so he was wide at Goddard. So when we saw him come out of the corner, he was on the track, but he'd been off the road, right? So it was a mistake by James Dorlin, which, to go back to your tyre point, would have done them a lot of good, because now they'll be even dirtier. But look, he's back on the money, isn't he? So he's regrouping, and he knows he can get past Archie Hamilton. So James Dorlin is becoming the star of the race for his zealotry. He's been up and down the order, and now he's going to get back up once again. We know that it is possible to put the pressure on Hamilton and force him into a mistake. We saw that from Theo Edgerton. James Dorlin has got good speed, he's got the line. Now he's got to get the car slowed down here for the S's. He's got the place. Is he going to go safely through? Yeah, flips over the curb, job done. Phew, he's back where he was.
He had to try something different though, didn't he? Because Hamilton would have been wise to that move at Redgate next time around. So Dorlin, he got the run out of Coppice and just decided to go straight for it. Of course, the person this is really benefiting is Ethan Hawkey, who is now starting to close back in. He was 2.4 seconds behind this pair at the start of the lap, but in the middle sector in particular, I reckon he was a little bit quicker. So they can see Hawkey, the white car with the orange flashes, running in fourth place. Theo Edgerton is in fifth, and well, for Hawkey, this would be a season best result, albeit it's only the third race of the year, and he's only finished one race so far, finished fifth in race one at Snetterton, but didn't finish the second race. There was a bit of a brace of non-finishes in race two, because Theo Edgerton didn't finish that one, Hawkey didn't finish, and nor did Alex Toff Jones. So I'm sure those drivers in particular will be looking to just get some points on the board, but for Toff Jones it won't be many points in this race, will it?
It won't. He's the last of the pros, but he has made good progress up into 7th place overall as Tom Jackson storms clear. Of course, his lead has just shot up by another 3 seconds, courtesy of the dramas that we've been having between Dorlin and Hamilton, so that lead gap has extended yet further. This car run by Rob Boston Racing, as you see, a team by racer himself, Rob Boston, who for many, many years dominated NASCAR MX-5 racing, but has had spells in Carrera Cup and indeed briefly British GT. But he runs a good squad, and Tom Jackson benefiting from not only his experience but that of Rob as a team owner and a racer. And Jackson storms down now towards the Fogarty S's. Looks drier there. You can see a dry line because there is only really one line through that section of the circuit. It's hard to know whether the rain is easing or not here because there's a constant mist. And from what we can see from our commentary box window, it's coming and going really, so it is still greasy out there. I wouldn't say it was fully wet, and that again might well be why people are looking after tyres. Yes, they'll still be working in these conditions, but it's not torrentially wet. But the Michelin brother guiding them through safely. They will go for the wetter parts just to keep those tyres cool, but there's still enough to generate a bit of spray, isn't there, from the leader's car?
Yes, but we are getting into that kind of greasy stage, as you say, which the drivers don't like, and nor do the tyres, because it's not really wet enough for a full wet tyre, but it's nowhere near dry enough for a slick. Michelin make a good tyre, clearly, but you can see there, James Dorlin, Archie Hamilton, they're all staying to their right, our left, as we look at it down the pit straight, just trying to get some of that nice cool water on those tyres to keep the temperatures down. Dorlin's lap time, then, that time around was not as quick as the leader. I don't like using the word settled, but I think he might have accepted that second is as good as this will get, and the last thing he needs to do is make another mistake. He's gapping Hamilton, he's got the pace to hold on to second, and that minimises the damage points-wise that Tom Jackson is doing to him.
That's true, and it's actually been a good recovery by James Dorlin, because early in the race it was tempting to write him off. He just was not making the progress. Well, he has stormed his way up through the order. Yes, he's been helped by people having errors, but he's had those of his own that he's had to combat. So James Dorlin getting away. Now, what about this gap third to fourth? Is Archie Hamilton settling for third? Ethan Hawkey, to the eye, is a little bit nearer, and 4.5 minutes, 3 laps, he might be able to have a go, but the progress is not massive, is it? If he is closing, it's fractions of a second by fractions of a second. He's not hacking away at that deficit.
Yeah, well, it was 4/10 on the last lap and a 10th in the first sector this time, so the gap is, well, it was 1.3 seconds, it's now going to be about 1.2, and in the middle sector, Hawkey is actually slower, so never mind, the gap goes back out to pretty much what it was. But the thing about Donington Grand Prix circuit in particular, it is a circuit of two halves, really, isn't it? You've got the sweeping run out of Redgate through Hollywood, the Craners, Old Hairpin, even the run up through McLean's is quite high speed, and then you get into this final sector where it is very stop-start, through the Foggy S's, through the Melbourne Hairpin, through Goddard's where they're heading now. So if you've got your car set up better for the high-speed stuff, you'll be quicker in the first half of the lap, which Hawkey seems to be, but maybe through the second half of the lap where you need that traction and you need to look after your rear tyres, perhaps that's where Hamilton is able to gap him. The gap does come down again, though. It's almost 1 second now.
Okay, still Tom Jackson with the race lead at 8 seconds and the fastest lap of the race, and you get a point for that. He also got a point for pole position, so it's being a very profitable race, this, collectively, for Tom Jackson, with what he earned qualifying, what he's going to score, barring any mistakes in 3 more minutes of the race before we get to the checkered flag. So Tom Jackson really has been the standout driver. All the other battles going on behind him there. 6th overall, Ambrosio Perfetti in the Chupa Chups backed car, one of the family's sweet brands, although Italians will tell you that it should really be pronounced Cubacups because of the CH sound. But anyway, Chupa Chups is how it is commonly known. Who are we to argue? He says in the hope of free samples arriving. Alex Toff Jones is still closing behind him. So there is the pseudo Porsche Salzburg coloured car heading up towards Coppice. And Alex Toff Jones is inching up onto the back of Perfetti, who would like a good 6th place overall, but it's the class points that are the concern. He'd be advised if ATJ does get close, just to let him by.
Yeah, and Perfetti is a country mile ahead of his nearest rivals, about 13 seconds back to Ian Humphries in second, who in turn is not under that much pressure from Nigel Rice. So I suspect that if Alex Toff Jones does suddenly arrive on the rear bumper of that number 51 machine, then it might not be the hardest pass Toff Jones has to make today. He's pushing on still, isn't he? Right out over those curves coming out of the S's. Has a look to the inside, but he was always a bit too far back to make the move there. But he signalled his intent now, hasn't he? And especially racing against a car in a different class, that's something you have to do. Just make them know that you're not going to sit behind them, you do want the place, and that maybe it's in their best interest not to fight you.
Exactly right. So the Italian, Ambrosio Perfetti, who runs under a Norwegian licence, comes over the timing line. He's 6th overall then, but Alex Toff Jones, just about making out of the glue, is there behind. Wouldn't think it was mid-August, would you? Like it. So turning through Redgate, Tom Jackson, the race leader, away and gone. Although the gap between the top two is down a little, but there's no way James Dorlin's going to get there in time. But it's been a great drive, this, by Tom Jackson. Just got another shot. There in second place is James Dorlin. And I've got to say that this new championship for the 718 Cayman GT4 Club Sports has got great potential, whether you're an AM that wants to go and race a Porsche, whether you're a career racing driver looking to make a career in GT racing, and this is your starting point, because the cars are well presented. Racing a Porsche has a certain kudos to sell to a sponsor. They're good, user-friendly cars. Unlike the road cars, of course, these are the normally aspirated cars with these 3.8-litre engines rather than the 2 or the 2.5 turbo. Make a different sound, of course. And there, Tom Jackson, he's going to squeeze one more lap out of this race, but hats off to him. This has been a mighty drive.
And exactly what he needed, really, and he's getting better as the season goes on. I know we've only had 3 races, but already there's a trend. He qualified second at Snetterton, dropped to 4th in race 1, but then he was second in race 2. Looks good, touch wood, for the win in first race here at Donington Park in very different conditions as well. So I think that, although it may be a bit early to speculate, Jackson versus Dorlin championship battle could be what we're in for, and that's a fight that I'd buy a ticket for, although he doesn't need to be doing that. Very sideways out of the final corner. Across the line he goes then, 12 seconds left on the clock, so time for one more lap. And the Rob Boston Racing team, who are third in the teams championship, but it's actually very tight, as you'd expect, I suppose, between Into Racing, Redline Racing and Rob Boston Racing, with only 7 points covering those 3 after the first 2 races at Snetterton. They're all top squads, they've all got experience running either Porsches or various other sports cars, as you said earlier on, and the teams championship should be another fascination in all of this. It's advantage Rob Boston Racing today, but we've got another race coming up later on this afternoon, and if the rain stays away, we could have a dry track.
Fingers crossed, because that would give us a very different type of race, wouldn't it? Something about wet races, but the ideal is that the conditions change, either start wet and dry or the other way round, rather than be constant all the way through. However, they've mastered the conditions pretty well this morning. Theo Edgerton, we saw having his wild ride through the gravel, 5th he is and 5th he remains. He's not that far behind Ethan Hawkey, but I don't think he's going to get him before the end. The checkered flag is ready, and despite people sliding off the road, they've coped pretty well with the conditions, none more so than Tom Jackson, who is on target then for a maiden win in one of these cars. He's racing Carrera Cup GB, but moving from British GT4 into the Cayman Islands Porsche Sprint Challenge GB this year. Has absolutely dominated the opening race from pole position. He made that good start, left everybody else squabbling behind him, got away on cold tyres, on a damp track, hasn't put a wheel wrong. He's got 2 corners to go, and this is going to be a big boost to him in the championship. Not as good as it was looking early on, because of course, as James Dorlin has been able to regroup, he's got himself up the order and he is scoring better. But here they come now through the left-hander of Goddard's. The checkered flag is at the ready, and so honours in round 3 of the Cayman Islands Porsche Sprint Challenge GB go to Tom Jackson. A great drive that. Hats off to Tom Jackson, because as I say, he hasn't just driven faultlessly. Second after a busy race. In contrast, James Dorlin then to maintain his championship advantage. Third across the line, Archie Hamilton being caught at the end by Ethan Hawkey. The gap between them was only 0.6 of a second. 5th goes to Theo Edgerton. In 6th place, the winning am, which is Ambrosio Perfetti, ahead of Alex Toff Jones, 7th from 14th on the grid. So a really good effort up the order that. 8th will go the way of Ian Humphries. And there is 9th place Nigel Rice. Ian Humphries 2nd am, Nigel Rice 3rd am. And then 10th overall will be Mike Price. So you've got Rice and Price 9th and 10th. Pete Chambers 11th. 12th with his penalty on the road, Chris Carr. It was an out of position start, so that's why he got the 10-second penalty. Probably guessed that. Carl Cavers 13th, and John Westbrook, who's an inveterate Porsche fan, has done, I think, 2 races. That's about it in Toyota MR2s before this season, coming into the sport, and he will be the 14th driver home. His driver coach, Tom Jackson, though, is the race winner. So good advert for his driver coaching skills as well, all of that. But yeah, Tom Jackson, just a very, very impressive drive, because those conditions, far from easy, as quite a few managed to prove.
Indeed, yes. It was a job really just to get to the end of the race in one piece, which they all did, and fairly competitively so as well. If we ignore the 7.2 second winning margin between Tom Jackson and James Dorlin, behind them it was all quite close. Hamilton was only 6/10 clear of Hawkey at the flag. Edgerton and Perfetti were only 1.7 seconds apart. Now, I don't think we can say enough about how strong a performance that was for Ambrosio Perfetti. Remember, he is an AM driver, according to the classification within the championship anyway, and yet he was not only ahead of one of the pro drivers, but he was on the tail of and catching the 5th place pro driver by the end.
So Tom Jackson wins round 3 of the Cayman Islands Porsche Sprint Challenge GB. James Dorlin, his runner-up, and Archie Hamilton, his third place of the season. Ethan Hawkey takes 4th ahead of Theo Edgerton. Ambrosio Perfetti 6th overall and wins the AM class. Alex Toff Jones started 14th and finishes 7th after a great effort. 8th goes to Ian Humphries, 2nd AM, 3rd AM, 9th overall is Nigel Rice, and the top 10 rounded out by Mike Price. 11th was Pete Chambers ahead of Carl Cavers and Chris Carr. John Westbrook brings the field to a close. Tom Jackson's winning margin over 7 seconds after a very impressive drive in testing conditions here at Donington Park.
Yeah, great racing at Donington then, and looking forward to race 2 a little bit later on. Will we see another twist maybe in this championship scrap that's developing between Tom Jackson and James Dornan? I wouldn't count out someone like Archie Hamilton to get a race win before too much longer, especially, as I keep saying, if the conditions are different later, it may have a very different look to the front of the field.
Indeed, 10 to 3 is the scheduled start time for the second Porsche Sprint Challenge GB race. Join us for that if you can. We might have found some sunshine by then, but we'll certainly find a grid full of Porsche Cayman GT4 Club Sports ready to go once more. For the moment, from Andy McEwen and from me, David Anderson, thanks for your company over breakfast. We'll see you later. Bye for now.